The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Welcome to Wonderfully Made. I'm Dr. Marcel Wiggers, your host. Thank you for joining us again to take a deeper look at how fearfully and wonderfully we're made, as David wrote in Psalm 139, verse 14. We're looking again during this show at God's promise that if we follow God's rules for lifestyle, we don't need to have any of those diseases from ancient Egypt, according to Moses' writing in Exodus 15. Specifically this time, we're looking at cancer with Dr. Clarence Ng from Weimar Institute's New Start Lifestyle program. Dr. Ng, I thought it was rather shocking that 25% of all deaths in America are due to cancer. What has made you so passionate about preventing cancer?
It's probably related to my family history. My father was born in Hawaii. He was one of 16 children, and ethnically we're Chinese. He had 4 sisters and 11 brothers. One sister died from ovarian cancer. Another sister died from breast cancer. 2 brothers died from colon cancer. A 3rd brother had colon cancer. That was successfully removed, but he died from a massive heart attack. Now, because of this family history, even though my father was a physician, his physician suggested he needed to have a special examination to check the colon for the possibility of cancer. So he went and had an examination done called sigmoidoscopy. This was done successfully. They found a small growth in the colon. It's called a polyp. And right on the tip of the polyp was a small cancer just getting started. This polyp was removed. After the polyp was removed, they decided they needed to remove part of the colon. That was done. There was no evidence of cancer. So in today's terms, you would say my dad was a cancer survivor. He lived another 18 or 19 years, and he did not die from cancer. Now, with this family history and background, we now come down to my brother. My brother never reached his 28th birthday. Now, what do you think he might have died from?
Did he die from cancer?
Absolutely right. From the time of his first symptom until the time that he passed away was less than 6 months. It was really a blow to our family. So as we're talking about cancer, I really consider cancer the enemy. If you look at our first illustration, you'll notice there in the picture that the largest cell is the cancer cell. And then after we look at that, you look at the other little cells that are around it, the white ones, those are all what we call the good guys. Those are the natural killer cells. And I'm so glad that a wonderful creator gave us these cells, because their job is to go out and look for the cancer cells. As we think about the armed forces now and the things that are happening in different parts of the world, the killer cells, their job is to go out on search and destroy missions. And as they cruise around going through the body, we find that when they find the cancer cell, their job is to destroy that. They're part of our body's immune system, and they help to protect us from cancer. It's very interesting that as we look at things, as one of my classmates said, in medicine, you'll see in our next illustration that faulty genetics loads the gun, but it's our lifestyle that pulls the trigger. So there's many interesting things and things that we can do in our lifestyle to help decrease our risk for cancer. And even if we should get cancer, there are things that we can do in our lifestyle that will help to minimize our risk for the recurrence of that cancer and the continued growth of that cancer.
What makes a cancer cell different from another cell in our body?
Well, one of the interesting and unique things about cancer cells is that a normal cell in the body grows to be a certain size, and then it doesn't grow anymore. The exception is the cancer cell and the fat cells. Fat cells, if we take in too many calories, they expand and grow too much, and that's the topic of another subject we're going to be talking about later on, obesity. But now back to the cancer cell. The cancer cell, it grows larger than it should, and then the other characteristic of cancers are that they spread to other parts of the body. They go where they do not belong. And we talk about this, we say the cancers metastasize. Now, the cancer cells have been changed, their genetics have been changed, something has changed their DNA, so the way the cells grow has been changed. And so what we find out in the way that a cancer develops, how does the cancer start? Well, you've got to have something which initiates the cancer, the initiator. And if you don't have the next substance we call the promoter for that cancer cell to multiply and grow, the cancer won't develop. So we need to have the initiator and the promoter.
So they need something to make it start and something to keep it going.
That's right. And we find that that's all related to our health and our lifestyle. In fact, as you see in our next illustration, we say that health is a function of lifestyle. Your lifestyle can be chosen. Now, how are you going to choose to live? This is really important. Many times we don't realize how important our lifestyle is, but as we explore cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and the other diseases that commonly afflict Americans, we're going to find out how important our lifestyle is and what we can do to optimize and improve our lifestyle so that we can avoid many of these diseases.
Well, you keep talking about lifestyle. What kind of things in our lifestyle actually promote cancer growth?
Well, as we look at the things in our lifestyle that can produce cancer, we think first about genetics, and that brings me back to my family history again. Just because someone in your family has cancer, does that mean that you're going to end up getting cancer? And that is certainly an influence, but it doesn't have to be so, and this is where lifestyle becomes important, because part of the influence for cancer is genetics. That's really true, but that's less than 50% as far as our risk for developing cancer. As we look at the rest, we have the environment, which includes our lifestyle, and pollution, the things where we live, what we do, all of these things make up part of that. But as we think back about lifestyle, now what does lifestyle include? Because that's really a common word which we hear. Does lifestyle only include things that you do, or does it include things that you don't do? What do you think?
I think both are included.
This is right, because many people, they say, well, lifestyle just includes the things that I do, not realizing that, well, there's things that maybe I don't do that might improve or lower my risk for having cancer and heart disease. The most common thing that people don't do as far as their lifestyle is what?
Exercise.
Absolutely right. And we find that many people, we know we should exercise, but far too often say, it's just too inconvenient, it's not easy to do, we'll do it later. And we will be talking about exercise later on. But now back to our lifestyle. There's some important aspects and topics in our lifestyle that concern our food and our nutrition that are very important in lowering our risk for cancer.
What would you say is probably one of the most important things you can do to lower your risk for cancer?
I think probably the most important thing that we can do for learning to lower our risk for cancer is learning about what types of foods are the ones that are going to help you to avoid the problems with cancer and to lower your risk for cancer.
Well, if our viewers are going to the refrigerator right now to get some food, what food would you say, definitely don't eat this, it will decrease your risk of cancer if you don't?
Well, one of the most common foods that is commonly found in the American refrigerator is meat. And we have found out from the studies that we do that if you can markedly diminish, preferably avoid the use of meat, and meat includes fish and chicken, because I know some places and some cultures where I speak, people will say, well, Doc, I don't eat any meat, but I just have a little fish and chicken. We've got to include fish and chicken. If you can eliminate those, you're well on your way to lowering your risk for cancer.
What is the problem with meat?
Well, the problems with meat are varied. One of the problems with meat is they have too much fat. We get too much protein, and the fat that meats have is saturated fat. And that is something that is going to increase your risk for heart disease as well. And then the other thing that we also find with meat, which we'll be exploring later on, is that you hope and you believe and you think that your meat comes from a healthy animal. But we're finding out now more and more that our meat may not come from a healthy animal. So that means we may be getting our meat from a diseased animal. Now, how would you like to have a hamburger from a cow that was sick? Does that sound very appetizing?
Not for me today.
Well, you know, I used to enjoy hamburgers and I really like them, but now that I found out what they put in the hamburgers, they're not desirable at all. They're something that I would rather avoid. So these are the things that we consider. Another product which we may find, or as we look at our refrigerator, other common things that are found there are eggs and dairy products. And there seems to be a relationship between eggs, dairy products, and meat. All of these things, in other words, anything which comes from an animal may well increase our risk for developing cancer. The Adventist Health Study has shown from the studies that they have done that people who do not use these products have a markedly lower risk for almost all cancers.
Is there actually I've read that even the way you prepare food might actually make a difference in terms of cancer risk. Is that true?
That's very, very true, especially as we look at meat. You know, one of the favorite forms, I think, of American eating out is, you know, the backyard barbecue. Well, the interesting thing is that if you take your steak and you take, you know, a 3.5-ounce steak, and that's really kind of a small steak probably, but that's what we're using for illustration. 3.5 ounces of steak, charcoal barbecued, will produce as much, or contain as much benzopyrene, which is a very potent carcinogen, as if you had smoked 60 cigarettes. Now you say, well, I don't smoke because I know that's bad for my health. But you mean, when I go out in my backyard and I charcoal broil 3.5 ounces of meat, that's what's happening? That's right. And that's only one of the methods and one of the things that happen. You know, as you look at other methods of cooking, well, I remember before when I was younger and didn't know as much, I used to like pan-fried chicken and steaks and things like this. But the very act of frying your meat also produces another carcinogen called nitrosamine and another one called methylcholanthrin. And these are carcinogens which, again, increase our risk for developing cancer. So those are two types of chemicals which cause a problem. Now you say, okay, well, I'm not going to charcoal broil my meat. I can't fry my meat. How about roast? You know, good old roast beef. Bad news, I'm sorry. When you roast your meat, we have a problem with something called malinaldehyde. Malinaldehyde is a chemical that, we say, it sensitizes the organism to cancer. In other words, when you give the animal that you're studying a small amount of this chemical, it would normally produce cancer. Then you give another chemical called a carcinogen in an amount which would not normally produce cancer. This animal will develop a cancer. So that makes malinaldehyde rather deadly. So these are the things. We have malinaldehyde, we have nitrosamine, methylcholanthrin, and benzopyrene. So that really amounts to people say, well, what's the safest way to cook meat? Well, I'd rather say it in another way. What's the least dangerous way to cook meat? The least dangerous way to cook meat is soups and stews, but of course the best way would be a diet which doesn't contain that.
So I hear you say that particularly the fat in meat is a problem that tends to promote cancers, and the way the meat is prepared, like barbecue. But what about fish? Isn't fish healthy for you?
Well, that's a common idea, but as we look at fish, we find that cooking the fish in some of the ways that we've just talked about will produce those carcinogens. But the other problem with fish is that with all the environmental pollution we have, with things in our environment like lead from the leaded gasoline, we have things like polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, we have dioxins, which are one of the world's most potent or worst carcinogens. These are commonly found in our environment, and since they're in the environment when it rains and so on, they often get into the water, This falls into the streams, rivers, gets into the ocean. And even though fish may live in the ocean, because of the chemical and environmental contamination, they often end up containing some of these chemicals, especially one is mercury. And we find that ladies who are pregnant should avoid eating certain types of fish because they contain more mercury, and that increases their risk for having abnormalities with their children or the fetus. But that's another subject in itself.
We've talked a bit about foods that would increase cancer risk. What about foods that actually decrease cancer risk? How can I protect myself, particularly if, you know, cancer runs in my genes?
Well, then this brings us back to plant foods. And, you know, what's really exciting as we look at our next illustration, you know, every day is a new and different day. And the neat thing about today is that today is the first day of the rest of your life. In fact, I even like to think of it in a little bit bigger sense of the picture. Today is the first day of the rest of eternity for us. And that's really exciting because if we will learn how to live and to live more healthfully, that we can make choices that are going to markedly diminish our risk for cancer, which is what we're talking about today. And back to the foods that you talked about. Many of the plant foods contain very important things which we call phytochemicals. Phyto means plant, and they contain chemicals or substances which are going to help to lower our risk for cancers. Some of these are called antioxidants.
What do antioxidants do for me in terms of fighting cancer?
Well, interesting enough, as we look at foods, one of the foods which has a large amount of antioxidants, as we're listing foods, one is called garlic. And garlic is very important because the antioxidants, it contains a substance called allicin, which in studies which they have done, it shows how this decreases the risk for the animals who are using this to develop cancers. And that's very, very important.
What about, I've read some in the newspapers, how tomatoes can actually be good for me in terms of fighting cancer.
That's true. In fact, one of the more common cancers which we have in the United States amongst men is prostate cancer. Tomatoes contain something called lycopene. And when you eat tomatoes, and it's better that they're cooked because it seems that the lycopene is more readily available, those who eat tomatoes on a regular basis have a lower risk for developing prostate cancer. And that's good news because as a male, that's a cancer that I would rather avoid, and I'm sure that you would want to avoid. And I'm happy that I like tomatoes. I know that there are some people who don't like tomatoes, but tomatoes are a good food for you.
And one study showed that if people would eat 10 servings of tomatoes a week, their risk of prostate cancer was decreased by half. Now, are there other things in food that might protect you? I read about one substance, fiber, that you don't even digest, and yet it helps you fight cancer. How does fiber help you?
Well, fiber is very unique, and even though it's considered in the past it has been considered a non-nutrient, we find it's very important in human nutrition. Fiber kind of acts like a broom, and it just helps to move and pass the food through the gastrointestinal tract. And when we don't have enough fiber, well, what we say is the transit time, which is the time the food takes to go all the way through from the time it comes through the mouth till it passes out as stool, the transit time is increased. And when we have an increased transit time, some of the food which we may eat, or because of the way it's been prepared, may have something in it called carcinogens. There's prolonged contact with the bowel wall. So the faster the food moves through, there's less contact. That means we have a lower risk for developing like colon cancer. So we find that fiber is very, very important. And you know, one of the things that if we would look at our next illustration, as we look at this one, you know, if everything that we know about cancer were applied today, 2/3 of the cancers that we have would not occur. And that would be tremendous. Just think, 2/3 of the cancers would not occur of the people who get cancer nowadays. And you know how many people die from cancer every day? In the United States, as we look at the data, there's about 1 person dying from cancer every minute. So every 2 days in America, we find that the same number of people who died in the World Trade Center in September of 2001 die from cancer. 1,500 people a year, 3,000 people every 2 days. And that's a real tragedy because we could save 2/3 of those lives.
I want to get back a little bit to fiber. We know that fiber is very important in heart disease, and we'll be discussing that in an upcoming show with Dr. Fritz. But I also understand that fiber is only found in certain foods. What foods contain fiber and which ones don't? Because I need that fiber.
Well, fiber is found in all plant foods, providing they have not been refined. We like to think of something, we say, whole plant foods eaten whole. Now, how about, one of my favorite grains, cereal grains, is rice. And the most common form of rice is something called white rice. And brown rice would be the one that would contain the fiber. In fact, we look at other cereal grains. We have wheat, and again, we have whole wheat flour, and we also have white flour. In fact, when I talk to people, I say, the whiter the bread, the quicker you're dead, and the whiter the rice, the sooner you're on ice. And, why? Again, because there's less fiber in the ones in which, in the white rice, in the white bread, the fiber's been removed. So there again, this is something that we realize. So all cereal grains in their complete form as whole grain cereals have fiber in them. Now, the other thing is you need to realize when you go to the market and you're going to buy your bread, like we had to do the other day, you don't want to look at you need to read the label, but you've got to look for something where it says whole wheat, because 100% whole wheat flour, because it may say 100% wheat. Well, white flour is 100% wheat, and you don't want it that way. So you need to have the whole wheat flour in there as well.
Well, we've alluded to it a little bit earlier, and I even read it in the newspaper. It says here, exercise, the new cancer therapy. Now, how does exercise fit in with preventing cancer?
Well, as we look at exercise, exercise stimulates and improves our circulation. And we have as we think about that, remember in the illustration at the beginning where we talked about the cancer cell and the natural killer cells? When a person exercises regularly, those natural killer cells, the activity of those natural killer cells is increased by approximately 40%. So every day we go out and exercise, our killer cells get out and they start cruising around our body looking for those cancer cells. So regular exercise has been shown by Dr. Cooper's group and other groups that people who exercise regularly have lower incidences or cases of cancer, and this is really so.
Could you tell us a little bit, for the viewers out there, how long does it take a cancer cell in your body to develop to a size where we might be able to actually detect that?
Okay. As we go back to our cancer initiators and promoters, we find that once that cell turns cancerous, it multiplies, and they don't multiply very rapidly. In fact, it may take many years for the cancer to develop to where we can find it either on X-ray or you can feel a lump or mass. In fact, probably by the time the cancer is noticed or diagnosed, 80 to 90% of the cancer's life cycle has already passed. And that's why, it's important to have routine, regular examinations to lower our risk for, not to lower our risk, but to help us to diagnose the cancer earlier, so that if we do develop a cancer, our survival is going to be much better.
Now, what are some of those warning signs that people should be on the lookout for?
Well, the warning signs that we find, one of them is if you have a hoarseness or cough, which lasts more than a month, you really need to go see your physician. If you should have an unexplained weight loss, like, many Americans are trying to lose weight, but if you aren't trying to lose weight and you find that you've lost 10, 15, or 20 pounds in the last 6 months, we better find out why, because there needs to be a reason. It could be cancer. Hopefully not, but it could be. So we have weight loss now. We have another one. What if you should feel a lump or a mass somewhere in the body? For a woman, one of the important things that she needs to do is self-breast examination. And if she finds a lump or a mass in the breast, this needs to be checked out to make sure that it may not be a cancer. If you have a change in bowel and or bladder habits, you need to consider this as well. These are some of the things, and we'll probably have to mention more of these later on.
An obvious change in the mole, blood present in the stool.
Right.
Are there any other signs?
If you have trouble swallowing, this can cause a problem as well. Trouble swallowing and that persists. Anything which persists more than 4 to 6 weeks needs to be investigated. We need to find out why we've had these changes.
Now, if you could give our viewers a prescription of how to prevent cancer, what would that include?
My prescription would include a plant-based diet, whole plant foods eaten whole, and an active lifestyle. I want people to be involved in some form of exercise. And as we'll discover later on, walking is a great exercise and one that everyone can do.
Well, one thing we haven't talked about yet is vitamins. How do vitamins play a role in the prevention of cancer?
Well, vitamins contain certain vitamins contain things that we call antioxidants. Vitamin C is an example, vitamin E. And antioxidants are important in the prevention of cancer. And we should have vitamin C-rich foods. Now, as we think about vitamins, oftentimes people will say, well, Doc, which brand vitamin should I get, or which store should I go to buy my vitamins? And my answer to them is the store that you need to go to buy your vitamins is your supermarket, or where you buy your food, or the farm if you raise your own food, or the garden. Because the best source of your vitamins and minerals is in the food that you eat, not in the bottle.
And, you know, you're Chinese American, and I know you eat soy products quite a bit. How does soybeans actually make a difference?
Soybeans have many different things in them. We call them phytochemicals. Some of the ones they contain are called isoflavones, diazyme, genistein, and these seem to be anti-cancer substances. With people who use these, we find that ladies who use soy on a regular basis have a lower risk for breast cancer and other types of cancers as well, so this is really important.
Dr. Ng, I really want to thank you for sharing about cancer today. Dr. Ng's statistics today have shown us that 2 out of 3 cancers need not occur. He's reviewed with us the warning signs to give us caution, and he's pointed out the need to focus on low-fat, high-fiber, vitamin C-rich, cabbage family vegetables, a whole plant food diet. Sound like God's original diet, doesn't it? The Bible gives us principles for eating because God is eager that His creation, you, enjoy good health even as our souls prosper. We'll see you soon to talk about how we can manage our weight. Meanwhile, if you'd like more information on a cancer-free promoting lifestyle, call us here at 3ABN.